From the lie that all dinosaurs were cold-blooded to Ben Franklin discovering electricity with a kite. Join us as we take a look at 10 lies you were taught as a child. And I want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Top 10s for helping out with this one. Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out what they've been up to.
Hollywood has played a large part in perpetuating this lie, but the truth is that gladiators in the Colosseum barely ever fought to the death. The last thing a promoter wanted was to have one of his prized gladiators die in combat, as they cost so much to train, house and feed. It's thought that the combat trainers may have actually taught the gladiators how to wound their opponents rather than kill them. The gladiators themselves may have even intentionally avoided delivering fatal blows to their opponents. Gladiator contests were also held under fairly strict rules. Referees oversaw the fights and most likely stopped it if one of the combatants was seriously wounded. Gladiators also rarely fought against wild animals. It was too dangerous for gladiators and too costly for promoters. Chameleons do use their abilities to help blend in with their surroundings, but scientists believe that camouflage may not be the primary reason chameleons change their colour. Some chameleons change colour to attract a mate, signal aggression, or even signal defeat in a fight. Some even turn a darker colour in the morning to help absorb more heat from the sun's rays. The Smith's dwarf chameleon is also known to adjust its colours based on the visual capabilities of specific predators. The chameleon's ability to change colour is due to its skin. The outer layer is pigmented, while underneath is a layer of cells that contain guanine crystals. The chameleon can change the colour of its skin by adjusting the space between the crystals, thus changing the wavelength of light reflected. If you were a child who went to school in Australia prior to 1990, you were more than likely taught that Australia was discovered in 1770 by British explorer Captain James Cook. Turns out this is a complete lie. Firstly, the continent was already inhabited by Aboriginals who first arrived from Southeast Asia between 40,000 and 70,000 years ago. Captain Cook wasn't the first European to discover Australia. Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon landed in Australia in 1606. During the 17th century, 29 other Dutch sailors explored the western and southern coasts of Australia. Indonesian fishermen also visited the coastline of Australia some 50 years prior to Captain Cook's arrival. They would harvest sea cucumbers from local waters and sell them to Chinese markets. Everyone has heard the tale of how famous post-impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh cut off his own ear after a fight with a French artist named Paul Gauguin, a man who Van Gogh was deeply infatuated with. However, this may not have been what actually happened. On the 23rd of December 1888, Gauguin told Van Gogh that he would be returning to Paris after the two had spent some time together in the south of France. Van Gogh, who was mentally ill at the time, became enraged. Some historians believe that Gauguin, who was proficient at fencing, may have actually cut Van Gogh's ear off with a sword as an act of self-defense. Gauguin left the next day and they never saw each other again, but prior to his departure, the two had discussed maintaining a pact of silence over the incident. In a letter Van Gogh later wrote to Gauguin, he said, "I will keep quiet about this, and so will you." You probably learnt at school that dinosaurs were cold-blooded like reptiles. Then some research suggested that they may have even been warm-blooded like mammals. However, recent studies suggest that dinosaurs may have been mesotherms, which means they couldn't control their temperature as well as mammals but weren't completely cold-blooded like reptiles. They were a hybrid of the two. If you were ever taught how founding father of the United States Ben Franklin discovered the electrical properties of lightning, you may have been lied to. The story goes that sometime in June 1752, Ben Franklin and his son William flew a kite into a thunderstorm. Hanging from the kite was a metal key. Depending on the version of the story you were told, you may have heard that the lightning struck the key which held the electrical charge. Thus, Franklin had proven that lightning was indeed electrical. In 2006, the television show Mythbusters replicated the experiment using a lightning simulator and found that if lightning had actually struck the kite directly, it would have almost certainly killed Franklin. Furthermore, there is no evidence that Franklin actually performed the experiment. In fact, Franklin wasn't even the first to prove that lightning was electrical. He came up with the hypothesis, but it was actually French naturalist Thomas Francois Dalibard that proved the theory. On the 10th of May 1752, Dalibard used a large metal pole to conduct lightning, 1 month before Franklin's kite experiment supposedly took place. It is well known that many stories in the Bible conflict with science. But did you know that December 25th, the date used to mark the birth of Jesus Christ, may not be correct? The Gospels of Luke and Matthew are the only two accounts of Jesus' birth in the Bible's New Testament, and both differ quite considerably. Matthew's version implies that Jesus' parents lived in Bethlehem and he was born in a house. Luke's version tells that Jesus was born in an inn, not the family home, and that his parents had travelled back to Bethlehem because the emperor commanded a census of all the world. Both accounts agree that Jesus was born in Bethlehem during the reign of Herod the Great, but neither mentions a date. The only reference to an actual time is made in Luke's Gospel when he says that there were shepherds in the field, suggesting that Jesus was born in the warmer weather. However, December is wintertime in Bethlehem. Historians have also suggested that if a census was taking place, it's unlikely that Joseph would have taken his pregnant wife on such an epic journey, especially during the wintertime. There's even speculation that both versions of events may differ from each other by about 10 years. Remember this picture from your old science textbooks? Well, it's wrong. Apes didn't evolve into humans, but they do share a common ancestor. Our bipedal forefathers and chimps separated from a common ancestor somewhere between 5.6 million and 7.5 million years ago. Despite the fact that we humans share 99% of our genetic sequence with chimpanzees and bonobos, there are still people who refuse to believe the theory of evolution. Scientists have uncovered thousands of remains from species that have become progressively more like humans, while evolution has been observed in other species. An antibiotic-resistant variant of a disease is a great example of how an organism evolves to survive. Everyone can remember that sad moment when they found out that Brontosaurus never existed. Well, turns out it was a mistake. The mix-up began in 1879 when it was thought that paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh mistakenly categorized some Apatosaurus bones. Then, for the better part of the 20th century, poor Brontosaurus faced a second extinction, as the majority of paleontologists favoured Apatosaurus as the correct species. However, Oxford University and the New University of Lisbon in Portugal have since published compelling evidence that the Brontosaurus actually did exist. Lead study author Emmanuel Schopp says that the most notable difference between Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus are the higher and less wide neck bones. The scientists conclude that there are actually three species of Brontosaurus: Brontosaurus excelsus, the first type discovered, along with B. parvus and B. yarnapin. How many times have you been told the best way to learn is to go to school? Well, this might not actually be correct. The teaching methods could be outdated. Research shows that the best way to learn is a method called distributed practice. This involves studying something intensely for a short period of time, taking a break, and then repeating the process until you have a firm understanding of the information. This method is not used in schools, however. The rigid structure of a curriculum and the intermittent changing of subjects may actually be hindering students' abilities to retain information effectively. Perhaps it's time the education system took a leaf out of its own book and learnt something new.
Well, there's another episode down. Thank you so much for watching. I want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Top 10s. There's a link to their latest video right there, 10 foods that you eat that are lies. I highly recommend it. Head on over. If you like what you see, why not give their channel a subscribe as well? And that's it for me. I'll see you all next time.